What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is of course a part of my series that I've been doing where I've been focusing on best picture winners per decade. I've already done the 1920s, 30s, and you clicked on the video so you already know I'm doing the 1940s best picture winners. There are 10 of them, so I'm going to be ranking them from 10 being the worst to 1 being the best, and of course my opinions. Now keep in mind some of these might have a little bit more of an explanation as to why they're the ranking that I chose. Others, probably not so much. So with all that exposition aside, let's get started. So, my number 10 is Going My Way with Bing Crosby. I didn't really like this movie. I like musicals. Musicals are fine, and especially during this whole time period, it's really interesting to see how there's a lot of love for, musicals, like in the 1930s, 20s, and 40s. There's just so much love for it. There's a lot of like callbacks, and I feel like with this movie though, it's just so monotonous with the musical numbers that it gets old after a while. Bing Crosby is very talented, but I can't lie, I do feel as though it is very monotonous with its musical numbers, and I don't know, I wasn't the biggest fan of it, and that's why it's my number 10. My number 9 is How Green Was My Valley. Look, this movie, I will always remember it for beating Citizen Kane for Best Picture. That's the only reason why I remember this movie. But I did watch it, and it's okay. It's okay. There's nothing really special about it. It's not like Citizen Kane where there's so much that you can literally write about, and many people have written about Citizen Kane. How Green Was My Valley, there's nothing really special about it. It's very tedious in its approach. It's well acted. It's, it looks good, but there's just not much to it, which is why it's my number 9. Number 8 is Mrs. Miniver, which I thought it was okay. I thought it was a little too long, but I did like the ideas, the approach, how it depicted how someone's handling, someone else being in war and the aftermath of that. And what's especially interesting is that because the 1940s, obviously America was, in the midst of World War II, it was interesting to see how they approached the material whilst this was occurring. I found that to be very interesting with this movie, and that's why it's a little bit higher than the other two. I can't see myself watching this movie again, but for a one-time viewing, it was okay, and I respect it. So that was, of course, my my number 8. My number 7 is Hamlet. Way too long, but I don't know. I've grown an appreciation for Shakespeare, and I feel like especially Hamlet, the tragedy with that is fascinating. And Lawrence Oliver does a really good job in the role, I feel like, as the lead character. I do have to say that not only is the length, but also pacing an issue. The dialogue is on point, per usual. It is well shot, but I don't know. It's middle of the road. I think it's okay, and I would give it a light recommendation, but it's not a great movie. But I do think that it is a movie that I would recommend nonetheless. So that's, of course, my number 7. My number 6 is Gentleman's Agreement with Gregory Peck. Gregory Peck is a good actor. I like him. He's one of those actors that I just can always watch. He's an actor that has charisma. And more importantly, I do think he has range, like especially in To Kill a Mockingbird. I think he's just such a great actor with what he's doing. And I feel like Gentleman's Agreement, it's simplistic for sure, but I think how he handles the material in the lead role is really good. The movie itself, again, it's just okay, but I feel like his lead performance really does handle a lot as why the movie is watchable. But yeah, it's okay. So, that's of course my number 6. My number 5, now the top 5 is where we get to movies that I actually were impressed by. My number 5 is The Lost Weekend, which is about a man who basically has like a breakdown and is recovering from alcoholism. Like he literally is caught up and literally is trying to break away from that. I liked this movie. I thought that this movie was interesting. It was ironically directed by Billy Wilder. It's not one of his better movies, but Billy Wilder does a good job of directing this movie, and I think the messages are still compelling today. It's definitely one of the first movies to focus on this topic, but I think it handles it in such a very interesting way. More importantly, because it's handling it with aplomb, it's so interesting that you can watch it 90 years later and still find it relatable. But this was groundbreaking when it came out because no movie had focused on this topic. They really weren't wanting to, at least in mainstream American culture. I don't know about like foreign movies. I don't know if maybe they focused on it before this movie came out, but I know for American cinema it was groundbreaking, and I do respect it for that. It's a solidly well-made movie, not one of Billy Wilder's best, but definitely a movie I would still recommend, and that's why it's my number 5. My number 4 is the political intrigue movie, All the King's Men. Not the remake with Sean Penn. This is the original movie. I like this movie. I thought this was a very fascinating movie. I do need to rewatch it. I haven't seen it in several years, but I liked it. When I saw it, I remember really liking it, finding it very intriguing with the political aspects of the movie. And I do think that this is a movie that you can watch nowadays and still be impressed by. And that's why it's my number 4. Now we get to the top 3, and I'm not going to lie, the top 3 are also movies that I've only seen once a piece, but I know I got to rewatch them. I know I do, because I think especially the top 2, I think my appreciation will go even more, because in retrospect, it's marinated like a fine wine. But my number 3 especially is Rebecca, Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca. I liked Rebecca. When I saw this movie many years ago, I remember liking it, really appreciating and nurturing the pacing. I remember not liking the ending, but in retrospect, I do like the ending. I do find it fascinating. It's a very well-acted movie. I think that the twists and turns in this movie are also really good. 80 years later, it's aged really well. I like this movie, but again, I need to give it a rewatch. The reason why it's number 3 is because of that. The other 2 movies have aged better, in my opinion, but number 3 is still good. Now, my number 2 is a movie that a lot of people would have as their number 1, and I get that. Maybe upon rewatch, it will be number 1. But for now, it's going to be number 2. My number 2 is Casablanca. I like this movie. I mentioned in my 1920s ranking list about how the Great Movie Ride and getting this book and a couple other books inspired me to watch a lot of movies that I hadn't seen before. Casablanca was one of those movies. I saw it on the Great Movie Ride, and shortly after I watched it, haven't seen it since then, and that's why I know I need to rewatch it. But I liked it when I saw it like 6-7 years ago. I remember really finding the messages and appreciation aspects of it to be really good. I know I need to rewatch it, but the thing is, my number 1 I saw about 4 or 5 years ago, so it's more fresh in my mind than my number 2. But Casablanca, I think it's a very well-acted movie. It's very different from Humphrey Bogart. I think that it's very well acted. The messages are very resonant, and the ending is very iconic. It's a movie that's quotable, for sure, and I really liked it. But I just know I need to rewatch it. That's my number 2. My number 1 is The Best Years of Our Lives. I love a movie that's long. I love a movie that's ambitious. I love a movie that's fascinating. And this movie really has a control over all 3. This movie is dealing with soldiers coming home and how they're dealing with it. And I love it when a movie has like a big cast and interwoves all these different stories, and this movie does that. This is one of the first, in my opinion, ambitious epic scope movies. Sure, there were some in the 1920s and 30s, but I feel like this is the movie that actually resonated with me, and is why I'm saying that it's the first that worked for me. I think it's a very well-acted movie. The messages are really good. It's very well shot. The ending is very resonant, and then also, again, just like all these other movies, the fact that it came out whilst World War II was coming out. Actually, let me check. I believe it was, because I forget the year that one. It was 1946, so it was a couple years after World War II ended. So this is a topic that was still fresh in a lot of people's minds. And the fact that it handled it, the PTSD aspect, and just like trying to go from like, that war-bound, hell-bound, to then just like a calm life and how difficult it is. Really fascinating stuff, and I really do respect William Wyler for doing that. Best movie of the 1940s for me in terms of Academy Award Best Picture winners, for sure. So yeah, that's my ranking of 1940s, Best Picture winners. Guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, as well as ranking. I'm curious to hear your guys' ranking of these 10 Best Picture winners. But yeah, that's about it. Again, thank you very much for clicking on this video. I appreciate the support and the love, and as always, don't forget the subscription, notification bell, and I'll get you guys later.